Good afternoon. It's Friday the 20th of March 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson, and joining me in the studio today is Patrick Henningsen. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
And by video link, we have Mark Anderson. Now, later on, or shortly, we're going to be talking all things Signal. But we're going to begin with, well, the Coalition of the Stupid is what we're going to call it, because Starmer was back in Paris yesterday for another meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing. We're definitely calling it the stupid because they really are. Here they are. What is this, Patrick?
This is Hasbro's new action figure, Euro action figure set, Mike. So they don't look real. That's all I can say.
No, indeed, they do not look real. Now, Starmer said it's now over 2 weeks since Ukraine agreed to an immediate 30-day ceasefire. That offer is still unanswered. It's over a week since Putin agreed to an energy infrastructure ceasefire. Since then, Russia has hit energy infrastructure sites across Ukraine. And he went on to claim that published readouts from both sides of the agreement confirmed that a naval ceasefire and prevention of use of commercial vehicles for military purposes in the Black Sea, that was agreed, but that Russia immediately backtracked and placed conditions on the agreements despite good faith participation for Ukraine. That's Starmer's position. So it's exactly as you said, Patrick, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, you offer an unworkable ceasefire and then shout see when Russia looks at the detail and doesn't quite like what it sees.
It's the Israeli negotiation method. So it's good to know they've adopted that in London.
Absolutely. Well, and Paris in this case, but just prior to the Coalition of the Stupid meeting, Starmer met with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. They discussed, this is their readout on this, they discussed their enduring support for Ukraine, agreeing that Europe must do everything possible to keep them in the fight and keep the pressure up on Putin. They both acknowledged apparently the vital role of the United States in forging a path towards a ceasefire agreement, and reiterated that Europe stands ready to support a durable and lasting peace when it comes. And he, of course, Starmer restated his unwavering commitment to NATO as, quotes, the cornerstone of our security. So he was once again virtue signaling for European Defence Union, because that is the term that's used with that all the time. Anyway, at the Coalition of the Stupid meeting, Starmer presented the outcomes of the planning meetings that we were talking about. There he is with the illustrious Zelensky, of course.
Great photography and marketing and public relations. So we really have to give it to the Mike. Right. It's like magazine quality. So, I mean, forget about the substance of it, but the look of it, the packaging, it's excellent. So they're doing a great job on the PR side. But the substance, I'm not so sure about.
No, indeed. So, as I say, Starmer was presenting the outcomes of the planning meetings in support of Ukraine, which, as we were talking about on Wednesday, taking place at military operational headquarters in Northwood over the last few days. The British regime described the planning meetings as intensive sessions. They apparently involved over 200 military planners from countries across the globe. So they're very determined to try to tell us all that this is something which is widespread support from all kinds of countries.
Do you think they, by chance, discussed the 700,000 dead Ukrainian men who've been sacrificed at the altar of NATO and European vanity over the last 3 years? Do you think that topic came up at all?
Only in the context of the next 700,000, probably.
The dire price that Ukraine and its population have paid because of NATO's proxy war against Russia. I wonder if that came up at all.
No, probably not. But they did apparently spend their time looking in detail at the setup of any future boots on the ground in Ukraine. And I just want to sort of highlight this image also, because you're talking about the PR images. I mean, what's this carpet here?
It's just showing the haute couture, as they say in France. Haute couture of that's Macron and Brigitte's personal selection when they revamped it's the Élysée Palace.
I guess so. I guess so.
Or wherever they are. But yeah, it's very with it. I'm a very contemporary. I like the mix of neoclassical, Baroque, and contemporary. I think it's a nice balance. It's very. It says a lot about modern France, and that's what Macron wants to get that message across. So I like it. And the vase on the fireplace, Michael. Look at that.
Yeah, if we just put that back up again for a second. I mean that's worth
a few quid.
Well,
right?
But I mean, it's like play school. It's like, kindergarten.
It's just stupid. I mean, it's ridiculous. What are they trying to sell here? They're trying to, this is some like advanced European brain trust with Zelensky plugged in there. Somehow they're going to figure out how to defeat the Russians and how Ukraine's going to win this war. That's not going to happen. They're not talking about that either.
No.
They're saying when a lasting peace, when it finally comes, what do they mean? When Ukraine wins, or?
All the language from them is that they want to keep this thing going for as long as absolutely possible. And, they are, I suspect, as we're probably going to see later on in the program, doing everything that they can to subvert any attempts at making some kind of proper peace deal here.
Yeah, long-term, low-intensity conflict, most profitable.
And most costly for Ukraine on that, for that matter. Let's move on, Mark, then and welcome you to the program. And the Federal Reserve, what's going on with Trump and the Fed?
Well, I recall during Trump's first term, I was at an Ann Arbor store and I picked up a newspaper, and Trump did, to his credit at that time, make some overtures about reining in the Fed, at least to a degree. Now, this is a completely exclusive report that I'm about to give, in the sense that the current Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, and we can put that up, gave a speech March 6th to the Economic Club of New York. He happens to be a member of that economic club. And this is something that got very little press. It was only covered by the Treasury Secretary's own YouTube and C-SPAN, which, of course, is a public utility funded by the cable companies, and then the Economic Club's own YouTube channel. That's the only coverage it got. So this is something of an exclusive. And what Bessent had to say to the club is shown here. Trump's recent executive order that requires the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Federal Reserve to submit regulatory actions for review at the Office of Management and Budget will improve analytical rigor, discipline, and accountability. So he's kind of making the Fed funnel a lot of its regulatory ideas through the OMB, which is not hugely significant, but there's more than meets the eye to that. Now, NASDAQ, of course, the Wall Street stock entity, they took notice of that right away, as is shown here in this article. And they were one of the only entities that has been watching what Bessent has been doing. And they actually went back prior to his economic club speech, and they went back prior to when Trump was president, and Scott Bessent was simply an economic advisor last October to Trump. And they picked up on something else that runs sort of parallel. Trump's proposed shadow Fed share plan challenges Jerome Powell's authority, Jerome Powell being the current chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. And so this is another area where Bessent and Trump are looking at kind of reining in the Fed and adding a little more government oversight. And here's something in terms of detail from NASDAQ, the shadow chair proposal. Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, previously floated a controversial plan, as I noted, to establish a shadow Federal Reserve chair. Under this unprecedented proposal, the shadow chair would have no official authority or power, and yet the position would serve to challenge and critique current Fed decisions. This is NASDAQ explaining this. The appointed individual would likely become the next Fed chair after Jerome Powell's term expires in 2026. So it would sort of prep somebody more aligned with Trump to replace Powell. Moving on, this is what else NASDAQ had to say that explains the significance of this, the potential impact on monetary policy. This shadow chair could create significant complications for U.S. monetary policy implementation. This dual voice, as it describes it, might lead to, and I emphasize this, market uncertainty that would likely increase as investors and financial institutions attempt to interpret conflicting signals from both the official and shadow Fed chairman. So NASDAQ, representing Wall Street, is a bit concerned about this. As this next slide also indicates, the institutional independence of the Fed, of course, is this all-important thing. Thou shalt not touch the Fed with any congressional or legislative or political concerns. the Fed has to be on total autopilot. So therefore, NASDAQ is concerned, saying this proposal raises significant concerns about the Fed's independence, a principle that has been fundamental to U.S. monetary policy for decades. In emphasis here, I put establishing a shadow chair could be seen as an attempt to circumvent the legal protections that ensure the Fed's autonomy from political pressure. And of course, they're concerned about the Fed's credibility itself being damaged here. And from there, we can move on a little bit more. And I talked to Conrad LeBeau about Besant's speech to the Economic Club and about his idea for a shadow Fed chair that was, again, last fall before Trump was actually elected. So some of this stuff has been brewing for a while. And he saw some significance in it. It's kind of a wait and see about that. Conrad has done a lot of very in-depth research on the Federal Reserve. He's written a book, A Critical View of the Federal Reserve Act, available at the website I'm giving here. That'll be in the show notes, I presume. But I wrote a little snippet on this, and Conrad is looking at the real swindle involved with the Federal Reserve, guys. He's looking at the specific ways that the U.S. government is shorted and swindled by the Fed. And he's trying with all his might to get the Trump administration looking beyond just regulatory changes and looking at the very heart of what the Fed does. And as it explains here, just to give some examples, each U.S. $1 bill costs the Fed 17 cents to have the U.S. print the money for the Fed. A 5, 10, and 20, and $50 bills each cost a little bit more per note. But in all cases, as Conrad outlines, the U.S. is swindled. The Fed's cost of printing $200 billion in U.S. currency is about $1 billion, despite the legal tender or face value of this same currency being 200 times greater. This fire sale of our currency to the privately owned banking system needs to stop, Conrad is saying. It has resulted in the loss, get this, of about $10 trillion in revenue for the U.S. in the last 110 years since the Federal Reserve was founded. So the U.S., besides having the potential to make a lot more revenue, or at least reasonably more revenue through the institution of tariffs, if the U.S. would actually get the full face value of the money that it produces for the Fed, then that would be another huge stream of revenue that would not involve taxing the American people. And so this really spells out that there's a lot going on behind the scenes that you're not going to hear about in the regular news stream to try and rein in the Fed that's carrying over from Trump's first term when the Fed was pushing back a lot what Trump was doing back then. So these developments are pretty significant. It's a bit evolutionary, but I'll be keeping a close eye on them, and there'll be more in the weeks and months ahead. And we'll see how far Trump goes with the Fed. Will he go as far as he's going with tariffs? We'll soon find out.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, well, let's move on then to the topic of the Signal scandal. And the Guardian here calling it a fiasco. Is that what you would describe it as?
Yeah, it's the first big scandal for the Trump administration so far in the first couple of months. And this has been just dominating the news internationally. The Guardian has written a ton on this. I think they published at least 10 articles, various news reports, and analysis and opinion on it. Here's one here. Signal fiasco is obscuring an essential question. Why are we bombing Yemen? Well, I'm leading off with that Guardian piece just to open this conversation here, because I think that is the operative question. This is really what we're looking at here, but there's a whole bunch of other things that have happened. So this was a private chat on an app called Signal. A lot of people out there have this app on their phone and use it. And the only difference is this was a intense national security conversation going on there. I was a bit surprised, Mike, to see that they would be, talking about war plans on Signal and not.
Well, why would they be doing that? Because it seems to me, my first thought on this is the reason they're taking that onto Signal is because actually, and there was a lot of criticism about the fact they've done this, why aren't they using the official infrastructure that's provided by the intelligence agencies or whatever? That must be the answer right there. It's because they want to have this conversation outside of the surveillance that they would otherwise be under.
Absolutely. So they have secure video conferencing. Normally that would be a venue you'd use for that. So because of that automatic delete feature and things like that, this keeps it somehow out of the public domain, except if there's a journalist in the chat. And in this case, there was. Let's just break down what happened here. It's an absolutely incredible story, but it opens up a lot of interesting questions. So we'll bring on the chat group here, Houthi small group. This is what they called it here. And we'll look at the main people in here, what they call the principals, Mike. This is what they call themselves. Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, there they are. Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, J.D. Vance, Vice President, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, and Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump. So these are the main sort of actors in here. And there's this guy, Jeffrey Goldberg, editor of The Atlantic magazine, and somehow he's been included in here allegedly by Mike Waltz at the bottom there, Trump's National Security Advisor, somehow added this journalist to the chat room. But amazingly, when confronted about it, which we'll show you later, he has no idea how he got added to this group, even though Mike Waltz created the group. So was it his aide that did it? Was it Mike Waltz that did it? Was his phone hacked by a foreign government and they accidentally put the biggest anti-Trump journalist in Washington, Jeffrey Goldberg, a never-Trumper, one of the big pushers of Russiagate early on. But here's the kicker. Also the greatest defender of the state of Israel. Very hawkish against Yemen, very hawkish against Iran. And, an arch-Zionist who was in the IDF as a prison guard, guarding Palestinian prisoners being tortured in the Negev desert. So that's Jeffrey Goldberg. Okay. So it's no coincidence. And this is what we'll posit here, Mike, no coincidence, in my opinion, and many others, that Jeffrey Goldberg was put on this chat group.
Yeah.
In fact,
people don't get brought onto the chat group by accident.
Well, no, Mike Waltz is trying to say that it was an accident or some act of God, but we think otherwise. Let's take a look, though, at the main chat here. This is the important bit. Now, what did we learn from this? This is the important part. At least we get a look in here of how people act and think within this White House and Trump cabinet here. So J.D. Vance kicks off, says, team, I'm on a trip in Michigan or whatever. He's saying, I think we're making a mistake by bombing Yemen here. And this was the Yemen bombing from 2 weeks ago that was carried out. He says only 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez Canal, 40% European trade. It's the risk is that the public won't understand why it's necessary. Is it in American interest, etc.? And so Pete Hegseth comes back here. Oh, this is Vance again. The bottom on here, it says, Mike, but I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent his message is with Europe right now. So the issue of Europe comes up. And so we'll go here to Pete Hegseth responds to the vice president. I understand your concerns, and I fully support you raising it with the president. But he says what this boils down to here is nobody knows who the Houthis are. So this is what we need to get our messaging say. He says, I think the messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we would need to say and focus on Biden failed and Iran is funding them. So he's saying this is because of Biden's failure and Biden's weakness and because of Iran is funding the Houthis. So it's all about messaging. So is this what the intention of the attack was? And we'll explain that in a minute. But I mean, it's kind of bizarre on one level, but also very crass on another. This is Stephen Miller here, and he's saying, what's Egypt and Europe going to give us in return for this supposed favor? You see, they keep saying Europe. Nobody's mentioning Israel in any of these chats. It's totally verboten. It's almost like Europe is code for Israel in this discussion, but it's amazing. So that's Stephen Miller. He's an advisor to the president here. And then back to Pete Hegseth here. Yes, the European freeloading is pathetic. So, this is terrible for European-U.S. relations, this type of disclosure here. And he's saying, talking about timing and so forth. And so we go on here and say, we're prepared to execute. And if And if I had final go or a no-go vote, I believe we should. This is not about the Houthis. I see it as two things: restoring freedom of navigation, a core national interest, and reestablishing deterrence. So they're saying that there's no U.S. trade going through there, but the freedom of navigation is.
But there's quite a bit of Israeli shipping going through. At least there should be under normal circumstances, right?
Yeah, and that's the only shipping that's being interdicted.
Right.
So the irony here is, and what Pete Hegseth's not telling you is, the reason there was no Yemeni attacks on any Israeli shipping because there was a ceasefire, but because Donald Trump and Netanyahu broke the ceasefire, then the Yemeni said, we're going to start interdicting ships. So this is a preemptive strike by the United States.
Right.
That's what this is. So they're not even mentioning the fact that the Yemenis are protesting the fact that Israel stopped food and medical aid and water going into Gaza. They ended the ceasefire, resumed the blockade of Gaza. That's the complaint by Ansar Allah, a.k.a. the Houthis, a.k.a. the Yemenis here. So it's just, a lot of this is just amazing propaganda. So wait a few weeks or months does not fundamentally change our calculus here. We risk a leak if we wait and looking indecisive. Well, it leaked anyway. And he's saying Israel takes an action first, i.e. hits the Yemenis, or a Gaza ceasefire falls apart. Well, the ceasefire already fell apart. So I don't exactly know what he's talking about here. It really shows how out of touch these guys really are. It's absolutely incredible. And here, Hegseth's putting the whole timetable before the attack. And so look at this. All the details here, F-18s launched, first strike package, 12:15 Eastern Standard Time, trigger-based F-18s, strike window starts, et cetera, et cetera. So he's given up all of the operational details here. So there's no operational security, or what they call OPSEC, in sort of national security lingo here. And so this is the real laugh here. This is Hegseth. More to follow. We are currently clean on OPSEC. Well, doesn't look very clean to me.
Not when you invite journalists in.
It's not clean. Everyone sees it now. So Jeffrey Goldberg ran with it. Godspeed to our warriors. So what Hegseth did is Goldberg initially released part of this, but didn't release all the battle plans, but said that the battle plans were divulged. Hegseth went into the press, as you'll see in a minute, and denied divulging any battle plans, calling Goldberg a liar. Goldberg then releases all these texts that we're seeing here, the full set of messages here. So it's a complete mess on that. So we're going to give a big emoji for Pete Hegseth on his OPSEC security. So ConOps, OPSEC. So anyway, there we are. So anyway, bringing him back here. And what do we need to look at this? The final wrap up. We need to look at this. Mike Waltz. I'm typing too fast. The top missile guy. We had a positive idea of him walking into his girlfriend's building. It's now collapsed. Excellent. Mike Waltz. Fist. American flag. Emoji. Good job, Pete, says Marco Rubio at the bottom. Mike Waltz. Great job, team. I mean, it's just so high schoolish in terms of the way that they're interacting. I mean, it's kind of shocking on that level. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we'll go to, this is Pete Hegseth, basically, before everything was released, denying it all in front of the American public. Look at this.
Looking forward to it. One question.
Can you share how your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic? And were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence. We will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly.
Why were those details?
So you can see, completely unhinged. Pete Hegseth doesn't like being challenged by the press. He's only 44 years old. He's a Fox News weekend host who was made defense secretary. The highest rank he attained in the military is major, so not exactly qualified to be the head of the Pentagon. So why he was selected by Trump or by another foreign government, perhaps, is anyone's guess. But you can see, he said, our brave warriors attacking the Houthis. Yemen's the poorest country in the world, and it's merely enforcing a blockade on Israeli ships in accordance to the International Courts of Justice genocide case, the Genocide Convention, a number of other international treaties, and the fact that they have a right to issue sanctions against Israel for crimes against humanity until it stops. And when they did have a ceasefire by Trump, they did stop interdicting ships. So what's the U.S. gone and done? Now Yemen's resumed. So who's damaged from this? The Egyptians are damaged. European trade is damaged. The Israelis are damaged, which we'll show you shortly. So the United States has actually ruined everything that was working. Just a few days ago, they've destroyed it all in the name of showing how tough and how great our warriors are and how brave our troops are against those Yemenis wearing sarongs, sandals. But I mean, the Yemenis are much more than that, of course. Ansar Allah is much more. So it's funny, they're demeaning them, but then saying how they're incredible. So here's Tulsi Gabbard. And the timing of this, Goldberg drops this story right before the Senate Intelligence hearings. So the timing, he held on to it and then dropped it right before the hearings. That tells you this was intentional. He was brought into the conversation, I believe, and it's designed to damage the Trump cabinet, and it did that. So here's Tulsi denying that there was any classified information, which was a huge, huge misstep for her, and I probably will end up being fatal for her career as a National Director of Intelligence. Watch this.
Contact the defense secretary or others after this specific military planning was put out and say, hey, we should be doing this in a skiff?
There was no classified material that was shared in that
So then if
signal
there was no
check.
classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security. Bobbing and weaving and trying to, filibuster your answer. So please answer the
Just
She did not do well there.
getting owned by Mark Warner is embarrassing. But anyway, here's Mike Waltz, national security advisor to the president, trying to somehow wiggle his way out of this strange situation.
Laura, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but of all the people out there, somehow this guy who has lied about the president, who has lied to Gold Star families, lied to their attorneys, and gone to Russia hoax, gone to just all kinds of links to lie and smear the president of the United States. And he's the one that somehow gets on somebody's contact and then gets sucked into this group.
Is someone in your intel? Is someone in your intel team trying to cause trouble here? Because that's the scuttlebutt out there.
Look,
that
we have people. No, look, this is a great group. The president has a great team. This is not first term.
No, your team. I'm not talking about the other principals.
No. These were principals and a couple of staff that were coordinating, as you saw, having a policy discussion as we went forward. And then just in the days before what was an incredible strike. Not only did we take out people that the Biden team never could, that we took out headquarters, missile caches, and actually one of the leaders of the Houthi organization. We've since taken out several since. And, that's what they don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about the success here. They don't want to talk about the hostages getting released. They don't want to talk about the Black Sea ceasefire that we just put in place today as the president ends the largest land war in Europe, or the border, or the fact that Panama just kicked China out of the canal, and success after success after success. So they want to focus on this. It's embarrassing, yes. We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened. But I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone.
So he needs Elon to tell him?
Yeah, you need Elon's tech team to say how he added the journalist to the Signal group. Okay, fine, but you see him and Hegseth attacking the Goldberg instead of basically owning the fact that somehow something went on here, Mike, and we'll never know. We may never know the full story, and probably Mike Waltz is somehow knowledgeable of what happened. It could have been an order from a higher up, maybe even the chief of staff that came from the Israeli lobby. Put Jeff Goldberg on the group. Don't worry, it's been okayed by the boss.
Right.
And nobody can talk about it after that because it goes too high up the chain. So it could be a number of possibilities here. But so there's different things to look at, which is what the impression was from it, what the takeaways were, and what the people's reputations, who got damaged, who was elevated by it. So let's take a look at that here. So some takeaways from the Signal Gate. Pete Hegseth comes off as hawkish, aggressive, or a leader if you're a neocon. So he is probably done on aggregate well out of it. Obviously, we're more critical of him, but J.D. Vance, cautious, diplomatic, dovish. So if you get an inside look at how they interact, this is the sort of political impression you get. Tulsi Gabbard, amateurish, sloppy, and compromised. Just by being in there as the NDI and not in a skiff or not on some secure, I mean, you can't let sorry, if we go back. You can't let the public have privy to these types of conversations. That's the problem, because when the public's allowed to see not only how you're portraying other countries, other leadership, and so forth, your military plans. We'll go back up on screen here. Mike Waltz, shady, sloppy, and dishonest. So these are the sort of impressions that they're getting afterwards here. And so this is one of the other things we're going to find from this is that there's a potential pressure release valve here, Mike, with regards to the attack on Iran. So a lot of public pressure has been released from this, and there's no pushback pretty much from this, from the public, or from either Democrats or Republicans on the bombing itself. There's only talk about Signalgate. So if from a sophisticated PR point of view, that could be maybe the intention of this. There could be multiple intentions of this. We don't know for sure. But if we go and look just a little bit further here, and of course, Jeffrey Goldberg, what do we know about Jeff on this? Well, Jeff was handpicked to be in this. He probably was gifted this. Maybe he was put on without his knowledge, but someone intended for him to be there. That is the main takeaway that people need to understand. So, but what about Pete Hegseth, our defense secretary? He's come off as a hothead, slightly fanatical, but just how fanatical is Pete Hegseth? Let's take a look at this. So these are the tattoos of Pete Hegseth. This is the defense secretary, 44-year-old, no experience, Fox News weekend host, not even a mainline anchor, a weekend host. So sort of second-tier Fox presenter, selected by Trump to run, a multi-trillion-dollar department in the United States government here. So let's look at the various tattoos. That's the cross of Jerusalem. Again, crusaders. And so above, though, there's this other Deus Vult. What does that mean? This is a God will it. This is a crusader call for the crusade. So he's a religious Christian Zionist extremist. But here's interesting. He got a new tattoo. Look below Deus Vult, and let's take a blow up of that. What does that mean? That's Arabic. It means infidel. So this is the defense secretary. He's got infidel tattooed on his arm. And so here's Pete Hegseth at the King David Hotel in 2018 during the first Trump term. Look at this.
You had a chance to go see the Western Wall of the Temple Mount, the Western Wall tunnels, so much of the old city. And as you stand there, you can't help but behold the miracle before you. And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle, 1948 was a miracle, 1967 was a miracle, 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle, and there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible. I don't know how it would happen. You don't know how it would happen, but I know that it could happen. That's all I know. That facts and activities on the ground truly matter. And that's why going and visiting Judea and Samaria, understanding that sovereignty, the very sovereignty of Israeli soil, and Israeli cities, locations, is a critical next step to showing the world that this is the land for Jews and the land of Israel. And I believe, in light of the support you have in Washington, D.C., the support you have amongst patriotic Americans, amongst evangelical Christians, amongst believers, amongst Republicans, even amongst some Democrats who can barely say it anymore in Washington, buy the ticket, take your action, do what needs to be done here in Israel, because I truly believe this is a moment where America will have your back. You have Donald Trump in the White House. You have Mike Pence as vice president. You have Nikki Haley at the UN. You have true believers in Israel and America that have your back.
Total religious fanatic. So this is just what it is. And why he was selected, probably because the Israeli lobby put him on the short list for that position because of his religious fanatical pro-Zionist beliefs. So no question about that. He doesn't have the CV, he doesn't have the pedigree for it at all. So those are some of the main takeaways here. And everybody on that Signal chat group, Mike, I just want to say is probably in violation of maybe Section 793 of the Espionage Act, probably the Government Records Act as well. And just using Signal is kind of compromising national security and classified information. It's national defense information. It's automatically classified. So there's all sorts of problems with this. Was this a setup? Definitely. Who set it up? We're not entirely sure. Who and why, we're not entirely sure, but it was definitely set up. And did it deter the Yemenis? We'll bring this up on screen here. Not really. They just fired more ballistic missiles at Israel. They wouldn't have done it before the U.S. attack. And what is this a prelude towards? We go on to the next slide. The next slide is the U.S. Attack on Iran that appears to be imminent, and everybody's talking about that. That's really what this all leads up to. I think in many ways, this was a test run, this scandal, to soften up the public for an attack on Iran. So they're really getting the public to acquiesce to what's coming, and that is talk of a bigger war. A war fever is now in America, at least on the right wing. It's sounding a lot like it did before the Iraq War. A lot of people they're talking about the inevitability of an attack on Iran, Mike. So we're reliving this again, deja vu.
And, we were talking on Wednesday about B-2s being shipped to Diego Garcia. That's not about Yemen.
No, that's definitely about Iran. So we're heading on a slippery slope towards probably another major war, and who knows where this one's going to end if it's allowed to happen.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Okay, let's move on. If you like what the UK column does, please support us. Support.ukcolumn.org is the place to go. There are options for helping us out. You can make a donation. You can join as a member. And if you do join as a member, you get access to extra content and so on. Pick something up at the UK column shop if you can, or from clive2carl.com if you use the link that's here. And we'll get a small commission from everything that you buy. But if you can't do any of that, that's fine. But please share anything you see on the UK column website. We do need your help with that. There's share buttons provided because, of course, we are subject to censorship and deplatforming and various other issues. We do not need that help if you possibly can. Now, another reminder of UK column on location. Very few tickets left for this now. This is on Saturday, the 5th of April in Cheltenham. You will be speaking at that, Patrick?
Yeah, I am going to be speaking. I'm very much looking forward to it. Not only seeing my colleagues, but also meeting someone like Catherine Gunn, who I've admired for many years.
Yes.
For what she's done. And we're certainly going to have a very interesting presentation, which we'll be delivering along with the others. I look forward to listening to everybody.
Fantastic. And if you can't manage to get there in person, it will be live streamed. And so have a look on the front page of the UK column website for how to get hold of a ticket for the live stream if you would like to join us on that. Now, yesterday's discussion with another speaker at the event, Raja Miah, is now up on the UK Column website. So that was broadcast at 1 p.m. yesterday. If you didn't see it, get the on-demand version on the UK Column website. A quick notification of an event happening on Monday, the 7th of April from 7 to 10 p.m. What's Wrong with Sex Education? This is taking place in Northern Ireland, in Lisburn, my hometown originally. And so get along to that if you possibly can, if you're in Northern Ireland. Now, let's come back on to Signal in a sense, because, of course, in light of the Signal shenanigans in the US, but also the situation with Apple and the encryption shenanigans over here on that. I thought it'd be good just to remind ourselves of the debate around end-to-end encryption and the effect of the Online Safety Act on that. Now, this is something we've been warning about for many years, but in the course of 2023, Meredith Whittaker from the Signal Foundation was warning and threatening that Signal would pull out of the UK if there was any attempt to force it to turn Signal into spyware. Which is exactly what Apple was being asked to do over the last number of weeks. So we'll start off here. This is a short excerpt from some comments she was making to Channel 4 News in July 2023.
There is no way to create a backdoor that only the good guys can walk through. And what's being proposed here in the context of end-to-end encryption is a backdoor. And we know from decades of history, from decades of serious research, that there's no such thing as a safe backdoor. If the British police can get in, hackers can get in. If the British police can get in, hostile nations can get in. If the British police can get in, Putin can get in, the Iranian government can get in, and others wanting to do harm can get in. So it's really important that we maintain the security and integrity of these systems.
I mean, just to clarify, Putin, the Iranian government, these are not the people we need to be worried about. It is our own governments that we need to be worried about. But look,
and their allies, like the Sixth Eye, the Israel government. As well.
Exactly, and Unit 8200, absolutely at the heart of just about every piece of infrastructure that we have. Look, we have a second video clip here because the person sitting beside her was Damien Collins. And he had been at least chair of the Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee for several years. And he was a major proponent of the most draconian aspects of the Online Safety Act. So let's just listen to what he had to say and how Meredith responded to his comments.
I agree with Meredith on that point. I mean, I don't think it would be safe to say there's a safe backdoor, because once you create it, other people will find it as well. That's why we're not going to ask companies to break encryption. What the regulator would do, I would imagine with a company like Signal, is when the regulator Ofcom is creating the codes of practice, they might say to Signal, well, what sort of data do you gather? And if Signal says, well, we don't gather data about people's messages, we can't possibly look at this. The regulator won't say you need to break encryption. It'll say that's fine, but you do have policies, let's say, on legal and appropriate use. How do you enforce those? What do you do?
None of that is specified in the bill, and this is our concern, because we hear things that are sensible like that from people like you, and then we look at the bill, and what is specified is a regime that would give Ofcom the power to demand that everyone in the UK download spyware that checks their messages before they're sent against a database of what is permissible to say and send and what is not permissible. And that is a precedent that authoritarian regimes are looking to the UK to set, to point to a liberal democracy that was the first to expand surveillance in the terms of the UN Human Rights Commissioner. This is unprecedented paradigm-shifting surveillance, and paradigm-shifting not in the good way.
So this is a massively important point. Now, you'll note that Damien Collins said that the UK would not be asking companies to break encryption. But since no MP can ever tell the truth, it should come as no surprise that the UK regime did exactly that with Apple. They were absolutely demanding that they break their encryption and provide a backdoor. So her point there was absolutely valid about the power of Ofcom under these circumstances. But here's the thing. In a sense, it doesn't matter how secure the end-to-end encryption actually is, because Signal is, without question, the most secure of every protocol that's out there. The issue here is if the deep state can get hold of one of the ends of the end-to-end encryption, that if they can get hold of one of the ends of the conversation, either through some form of social engineering, as seems to have happened in the United States, or through a device being seized at a border and the storage on that device imaged. And a great example of that is this article in the BBC, because this Israeli company, Celebrite, was claiming to have cracked Signal's encryption. Well, it hasn't, and it's done absolutely no such thing. What they actually can do is they can read the file format of the Signal app if they can get hold of the physical phone. So they need to have the actual physical phone in their hands, and they need to image the storage of the phone in an unencrypted state. So they've got to get you to unlock your phone, and then they can read the file that Signal saves on the device, which is not the same as getting
remote.
cracking and getting remote access.
Yeah.
So the real risk here is the security of the device that your application is running on. And that actually is evidenced by this article from Le Monde, because France brought in legislation also in 2023, making it lawful for the French police to remotely control phones and laptops to enable the recording of a person of interest, to switch on cameras, switch on microphones. Now, Apple did something to try to mitigate that somewhat, because they now put a green dot on your device to show whether there's the microphone or the camera is enabled. And so they do something to at least attempt to give somebody an indication that something's being used. But nonetheless, that I think is the major risk, is that the control of the endpoint. And I think even if this journalist hadn't been brought into the US conversation, however that happened, there are still some questions to be asked about using personal phones for those types of conversations.
Yeah, I would say very risky, very risky.
And just to finish this segment on Ofcom, I just wanted to mention this. Ofcom has fined the provider of OnlyFans. This is a company called Phoenix International Limited, £1.05 million for, they say, failing to accurately respond to formal requests for information about its age assurance measures on its platform. So OnlyFans, as you know, pornographic in many cases, and they're effectively requiring facial recognition and other mechanisms for identifying people's ages as a form of digital ID required here, and that's what this is all about. So companies submitting to Ofcom regulation are required under the Online Safety Act to respond to statutory information requests from Ofcom in what Ofcom describes as an accurate, complete and timely way. And they say that in June 2022 and in June 2023, they asked for information from Phoenix on their age assurance measures, the ones that they had on the OnlyFans website. This included asking how OnlyFans was implementing age checks, and specifically about the effectiveness of OnlyFans third-party facial recognition technology and facial estimation technology. And Ofcom said that in January 2024, Phoenix had informed them that it provided incorrect information about the challenge age set for its age estimation technology. And so an investigation was opened. They found that Phoenix had not reported this issue for 16 months, and therefore they were in breach, and that resulted in an incorrect submission. They imposed this penalty of £1.05 million, which they say is going to be passed on to the Treasury. So this money goes to the British government, but that includes a 30% reduction, because they would have had a bigger penalty if they hadn't complied and they hadn't basically accepted the findings and held their hands up to it. So, this is another example of the power that Ofcom has been given as a result of this piece of legislation.
Yeah, very wide-ranging powers.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, Mark, let's come to you now. And elections.
Yes. In my research over the years, I've, of course, found that the main control levers for controlling populations is money, media, elections. Sometimes I just call it MME for short. And given the prodigious amount of executive orders coming out of the White House, unprecedented with this second Trump administration, it's been a challenge as to which ones to cover. So based on these main control levers, I reported about money a little earlier today, the author Conrad LeBeau. I'll mention in passing about that first report today that Conrad ultimately emphasizes, of course, that the U.S. would cut the Fed out altogether and issue its own currency, debt and interest free, which would be removing a significant control measure from the population of the U.S. and ultimately beyond because of the ripple effects that would happen. I wanted to put that cherry on top for my previous report. But this March 25th executive order is quite significant here, according to an author that and a activist that I'll mention in a minute, preserving and protecting the integrity of American elections. And there's some laudable things here. This is an issue I've followed for a long time, so I know what to look for. And in this is right from the executive order. It points out that in tabulating votes, Germany and Canada require the use of paper ballots counted in public by local officials, something that activists and critics have been talking about a long time in the US, but we can't seem to get there. And it also points out that countries like Denmark and Sweden sensibly limit mail-in voting to those. They limit it to those who are unable to vote in person due to, handicaps and things like that, physical handicaps. And those countries like Denmark and Sweden do not count late arriving votes, regardless of the date of postmark. But many American elections now feature mass voting by mail, with many officials accepting ballots without postmarks or those received well after the official election day. So this executive order is pointing out a number of things that key critics I've interviewed over the years have pointed out. And we'll move on from there. There's another important part of this. And in the next slide, it talks about, here we go. Well, the United States has not adequately enforced federal election requirements. And basically what it comes down to is that there are a number of existing laws that simply aren't being enforced. In other words, it's not a matter of Congress needing to pass a whole lot of new laws. And this happens a lot with the border too. The border has a number of laws on the books and regulations that simply aren't enforced. And the same goes for achieving election integrity. Now, Garland Favorito is the main activist who's been working in the state of Georgia, really doing yeoman's efforts, guys, to show, first of all, that there really is major election fraud happening in the U.S., including in the 2020 elections, but also providing very good examples on how to combat election fraud. And anyway, I have some quotes from Garland in terms of his reaction to this executive order. This is one of them we'll put up here. And he would know. He would know all the particulars to judge this executive order. He said this EO is a great first step. I expect more orders coming on election integrity. It shows Trump and his team have done their research. And that's reassuring to hear. And talking about his work at the state level, I just talked to Garland yesterday on the phone. He said there's a bill in Georgia about hand-marked paper ballots and another to get the state of Georgia out of what is called ERIC. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then there's yet another bill to help resolve invalid voter registrations. Now, moving on from there, I'll just mention here with this slide that there is an existing interview with Garland Favorito from the fall of 2023. Viewers can check that out. And he explains in painstaking detail that there genuinely and truly is election fraud going on at a very fundamental level, and that the main problem is the electronic vote tabulating machines, not so much voter ID and all these other miscellaneous issues that are talked about. Now, what is ERIC? That was mentioned briefly by Garland, and he wants to get the state of Georgia out of it. It is the Electronic Registration Information Center, and their stated mission is to help states improve the accuracy of America's voter rolls, increase access to voter registration for all eligible citizens, reduce election costs, and increase efficiencies in elections. And the next slide will show that everything basically looks like it's on the up and up. It shows that Jonathan Marks is the chairman of ERIC, and he's the deputy secretary of elections for Pennsylvania. And Blake Evans is the immediate past chair, and he's the director of elections for the state of Georgia itself. So everything looks to be on the up and up. Just a coalition of state officials that run elections. However, when you look at the background and who created ERIC, and this is something Garland pointed out, that creator is David Becker, a very left-leaning election law advocate and the co-founder and executive director of the Center for Election Innovation Research. He previously worked at Pew Charitable Trust, where he organized the creation of ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center. He also worked for the ultra left-wing People for the American Way, and he worked in the Department of Justice, where he got in a number of scrapes. He got in trouble for actually meddling in elections in sort of an indirect fashion. So all in all, the executive order from the Trump administration, guys, is firing on a number of good cylinders and pushing most of the right buttons. As Garland, who is very much an expert on this, has to say, there's more to be seen. There's more that ought to be done. But the election situation in the U.S. has long been egregiously out of whack with the very untrustworthy non-public counting of the votes. Votes are cast in public but counted in secret. And that's been a huge issue here. And hopefully we're seeing the beginning of the end of these very secretive vote counts that have plagued the U.S. for decades. So we'll see. But with Garland's stamp of approval on this, things are looking good so far. So back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, we began with the coalition of the stupid. Let's continue on that theme, or end on that theme, because JD Vance is visiting Greenland today. Now, this is how Vance announced his visit.
Hey guys, it's JD Vance, the Vice President, and you know there was so much excitement around Usha's visit to Greenland this Friday that I decided that I didn't want her to have all that fun by herself, and so I'm going to join her. I'm going to visit some of our guardians in the Space Force on the northwest coast of Greenland, and also just check out what's going on with the security there of Greenland.
So that sounded like Shady Vance. Everybody in the office agrees that it sounded like Shady Vance, not JD. But anyway, the question is this a popular visit? And, well, Donald Trump thinks it is. So let's see how popular he thinks it was.
Sure. I think it's important. It's important from the standpoint of international security. And if you look at the ships outside of Greenland, you have Russia, you have China, you have lots of different people and lots of different places, and it cannot go on the way it is. It's not going to go on the way it is. I'll make a statement. It's not going to happen. So they're going there, and that's purely friendship.
Who's doing the inviting? You said people.
A lot of people, yeah. People from Greenland are asking us to go there. We have many, many requests from many, many people, some officials too.
Mr. President.
Yeah.
Well, he may have been overstating the situation. Let's have a look and see how many people, because as has been widely reported, and here's a tweet about this. Vance's wife, Usha, is in Greenland already, and she thought it'd be a great idea if she prepared the visit of her husband by recruiting ordinary Greenlander families who she hoped would open their front doors to them. Naturally, they chose the Greenland capital, and, well, oh dear, not a single family apparently wanted to have anything to do with them whatsoever. It's a bit embarrassing, is it not?
So they had to cancel her visit because nobody wanted to have her in the house for a photo op. Surprise, surprise. So I like these Greenlanders already. They seem to be people of integrity, Mike.
Yes. Well, anyway, what's this all about? Well, it's about the Arctic. Which is the newest geopolitical front line against Russia and China, as Trump was sort of hinting at there. So here's exercise Joint Viking. That's just completed. This is U.S. Marines that's participating in an exercise in Norway. It was called Joint Viking 25. It was a Norwegian military exercise focused on Arctic cold weather training, military engagements, and the exercise demonstrated, they said, that the Marine Corps have a unique ability to rapidly deploy during a crisis, and they aim to enhance operability with Norway and with Europe. But I thought they were getting out of Europe. So this is very strange.
Yeah. Who are they fighting? Are they training to fight the Russians? Russians are pretty good at cold weather fighting, I'm told. Like that's all they do, Mike.
I believe they are.
Yeah,
yes.
that's all they do.
But anyway, look, the reason the Arctic is so important all of a sudden, and it's not really all of a sudden because it has been for the last lot of years, is that Russia and China are working hard to open up trade routes along the northern coast of Russia. The Arctic was once described as an area of high cooperation and low tension, and certainly the BBC and a whole bunch of others really making the point that this situation has changed. The meme has been dropped. It's climate change, you say, and the claim is that average temperatures are rising, and therefore accessibility to the region is rising, and therefore they've got to do something about it. So the narrative is going that the Arctic is central to Russia's military and strategic thinking, that because of the military setbacks that Russia has suffered in Ukraine, and with Finland and Sweden joining NATO, the importance of the region for Putin is only increasing, and therefore, we've got to continue to fight. And this has been in the media here. So let's just, this over the last few years, malign Putin eyes new Cold War as he plots the Arctic. The Guardian view on the Arctic threatened by Putin's war. Russia and China opening a new anti-Western front in the Arctic. This has been going through the media for years, and also the think tanks and NGOs countering Russia's hybrid threats in the Arctic. And even our old friend Jens Stoltenberg, who went before he left NATO. This is not, he was talking about NATO 2030. This is not about NATO moving into the South China Sea. But it is about NATO moving into the Arctic and Africa, investing in heavy. And so this narrative just continues to be as they develop a new front. So I wonder how many fronts they intend to fight Russia on.
Well, it's not that Russia's planning military conquest. It's that the Northern Passage, Mike, the Arctic Passage, is becoming it's going to become a major trade route, and so they want to be able to control it and block it if they so choose, not because of military activity by Russia, because of trade activity from China, from Asia, from Russia as well. This is about controlling trade and commerce. That's what NATO and the United States are playing at here. And this idea that the North Pole is going to melt and you're going to be able to drive a ship through at will just doesn't stack up to the actual data on ice cover on the North Pole, which is still frozen as we speak. It's getting frozen as early as it normally does and as late as it normally does. So there's seasonal breakup of ice, but this idea of Al Gore saying there'll be no North Pole by the year 2010, that didn't happen, and it's not going to happen for the foreseeable future, especially since we're going into a global cooling phase, a Maunder minimum. So that's kind of throwing the whole climate change conversation up in disarray. This is why they're panicking, and now they're basically punting to the military-industrial complex on the climate narrative. Amazing. Well, look, it's 2:00. We've got to leave it there for today. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Mark, for joining us today, and thanks everybody that's watched. Don't forget, very few tickets left for the event on the 5th of April. If you can possibly get to Cheltenham, it's going to be a fun day. Live stream available as well. But join us in a few minutes if you're a UK Column member for some UK Column News Extra. Otherwise, have a great weekend. We'll see you at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. We've got to leave it there. Bye-bye.